He says the environmental movement is no longer about saving pandas and hugging trees. It's a fight for basic human survival. Activist, photographer, filmmaker Rob Stewart, who is being called part Michael Moore, part Jacques Cousteau, takes us back to his frog and snake catching days and forward to the making of Shark Water, his stunning documentary or shockumentary. Since Stewart was a kid, he has been a fish nerd. Today, he not only swims with sharks, he helps save them and their fins. He knows firsthand why getting off an alligator is trickier than getting on. The stingrays are tough to catch and that pet pythons bite and scare dads. Stay with us for Rob Stewart and his true life adventures. It's good to be here with you today and with self-described animal geek, eco-warrior, photographer, filmmaker Rob Stewart. When he was a young lad, his mother always carried a bucket on their walks so he could bring home odd critters he found along the way. Trying to save everything from garter snakes to sharks has taken Rob all over the world on crazy adventures with amazing people. Activism has given him the life he dreamed of as a little kid, a life that is rarely boring. Shark Water was his first documentary. Revolution is his new film. It is my pleasure to welcome Rob Stewart to Vancouver, one of the few guests who could have a tree frog in his pocket. Or a python in his briefcase, maybe.
Yep.
Really? Should I check your pockets before we start the interview?
I wish. Getting them on airplanes has been difficult, though. Otherwise, I'd have one for sure.
So, the theme that ran through your childhood seems to be critters, big and small.
Yep. Ever since I was a kid, I was fascinated with animals. And the cooler, the weirder, the more badass, the better.
The uglier.
The uglier, the bigger its teeth. I like the stuff that ate the cute and cuddly, furry stuff.
Mm-hmm. And did your mother encourage you to bring home critters, and your father encourage you too?
They did, yeah. They were my earliest critter catching buddies. My dad catching frogs, my mom catching snakes, and we'd always keep them, for little parts of the summer and then let them go before they'd have to go and hibernate before it got cold.
And there are many incidents in the book, Save the Humans, where the odd python escapes in the house and things like that, because your dad, I understand, is afraid of snakes.
Yeah,
was.
Yeah, my dad's afraid of snakes, my mom's okay with snakes. And so I had two pretty big snakes when I went to finish university in Kenya, and I left these snakes with my parents. And my mom was gonna be, okay with them in the house, and my dad was gonna be responsible for them, but they waited too long to feed them. And so by the time they went in to go and bring this rat in to feed the snake, my dad was sort of shaking, and the snake lunged at his face and almost took my dad over the banister of our second story of the house.
I see. Well, do they feed live? Pythons?
No, dead rats.
Dead rats. So at least it's a frozen dead rat or something.
Yes.
But I bet in your freezer, in your house, there were frozen dead things like lizards and rats, or were there?
There were frozen dead things for sure, and because of that, I had to have a separate freezer in the basement because my sister had cute and fuzzy pets like hamsters and stuff, and would have nothing to do with a freezer that had any of those inside it.
Okay, and you're not so much into fuzzy and fur as you are into scales and slitty eyes.
Scales and teeth and that kind of thing, yeah.
And apparently, you also like to collect, as a kid, screwdrivers.
Screwdrivers, light bulbs. Yeah, light bulbs particularly were an obsession of mine. I'm not sure why, but I just found them fascinating and would scale anything I could to unscrew them and take them home. Our light bulb collection powered my parents' house till I was 16.
Really?
Yeah.
And did you ever stay out of the chandeliers?
Yep, swinging from chandeliers. Yeah,
No, you did swing from the chandelier, didn't you?
Oh yeah. The weirder and the more intricate looking the light bulb, the better. And the ones in chandeliers were often shaped like little flames, and those were pretty enticing.
I see. And there is a tale, and I won't tell all the tales in the book, where you decided, I think, to unscrew the banister on the stairs in the house.
Yep. Yeah, I was really good at taking things apart. But putting them back together wasn't that interesting for me. So I'd take apart anything in the house I could find. Screwdrivers in particular were quite amazing.
So you grew up safe and wealthy, and you had lots of experiences. What led you to sharks?
I had a goldfish from the time I was a kid, and a little goldfish bowl transformed into a larger fish tank, and then I'd keep putting larger and larger animals and predators in this tank. And then I became a wildlife photographer because I figured, this would be the pinnacle of my experience. Spending my time underwater every year, photographing animals and bringing these tales back to people. And as a kid, I met my first shark when I was 9, and this shark was afraid of me. And it made me realize, if sharks are afraid of a 9-year-old kid, then the media is probably wrong. Sharks maybe aren't menacing predators to people.
Sharks are misunderstood, according to you.
Sharks are misunderstood, and I think they're misunderstood according to anyone who's actually met one. The only people that are afraid of sharks are people that haven't met one underwater. You talk to people that interact with sharks on a daily basis or go diving with them all the time, and they think they're hugely misunderstood.
However, I guess if you're surfing in shark territory, you have to be a little careful so you don't lose a leg.
We do some pretty dumb things on this planet. Great white sharks are ambush predators, and they, usually catch seals and sea lions by swimming below and then, launching up at them because they see the silhouette and they hear the sounds of a seal or sea lion. And if you're a shark, you're slower than a seal and sea lion. So the best case scenario is to find an injured one making a lot of splashes on the surface of the water, just like we do when we're paddling around surfing in a black wetsuit in areas where seals and sea lions swim all the time.
So back to when you were 9. Your first dive, when did you learn to dive?
I learned to dive when I was 13. Yeah, you're not
okay,
allowed
so
to.
9 you meet the shark where?
In the Cayman Islands. Before you can dive, the only way you can get underwater and stay down there for a significant period of time is breath hold diving, free diving. So from the time I was 3 or 4, I was holding my breath and swimming down underwater and trying to meet the creatures that are there.
I see. Do you know Mandy Cruikshank?
No?
No, she's a deep sea diver.
Okay.
Or, free diver.
Free diver, right?
Always amazing. But you were the kid on the bottom of the pool, I bet.
Mm-hmm.
Always.
Yep. Always, for sure.
First scuba lesson, first dive, how you learned to do it, where were you?
I learned to dive in my parents' pool in the backyard when I was 13. And it was sort of predetermined that we would learn to dive as soon as I was allowed to, because I was the youngest and I'd been talking about diving my entire life, and that was the thing I was looking forward to most, getting underwater. Because underwater there's 3.5 billion years of evolution compared to 500 million years of evolution on land. So there's behaviors and ecosystems and critters that could never have possibly evolved here. And underwater you can fly. So I was super excited.
Critters like hammerhead sharks.
Critters like hammerhead sharks.
Tell me about them.
Hammerhead sharks are a recent evolutionary experiment. Sharks as a whole are 450 million years old. They've survived 5 major extinctions. They predate the dinosaurs by 150 million years. And hammerhead sharks are 70 million years old. And sharks have incredible sensory systems. They have sensors on the underside of their snout that detect electromagnetic fields called ampullae of Lorenzini. And so the hammerhead has this far bigger sensory system. So they're some of the most sensitive sharks in the world and some of the most shy sharks in the world. But they can follow undersea ridges like road maps. They can feel your heartbeat and tell if you're excited or you're scared. And they can find animals that are hidden under rocks or hidden under the sand.
I see, I'm watching them now. And do they often gather in circles? The females gather in circles, have a chat? The male goes hunting, what?
The females do gather in schools, yeah. They call schools of sharks shivers. And they gather at a few undersea pinnacles, seamounts basically. So hammerhead sharks and a lot of shark species roam the entire oceans, and they basically congregate at a few of these places to socialize and to mate. And the hammerhead shark schools are controlled by the largest and most dominant females. And they control what females sit where in the school, because males will come to the center of the school to pick the largest females.
And when someone like yourself is with them, how do you stay safe? Do you worry about staying safe? Do you commune? Like right up close to the hammerhead head must be some experience.
It's amazing, yeah. Hammerhead sharks are really beautiful animals, and they're so sensitive and so shy. So to scuba dive with them is quite difficult because they're afraid of bubbles. So you need to either free dive, hold your breath, or use something called a rebreather, which recirculates the air that you breathe and takes the carbon dioxide out while injecting oxygen. And even with that, you've got to be really calm. You've got to make sure your heart rate is low, and you've got to spend a lot of time with them so they get comfortable with you. But you never have to be afraid with these hammerhead sharks because they've got small mouths, they've got teeth shaped like needles, they've got 70 million years of eating things that live in the ocean. They're not interested in eating people at all.
How do animals prove to us, sharks specifically, others, how badly we are screwing things up, we humans?
So it's a bit of perspective that sharks give us. If you look at sharks having been here for 450 million years through 5 major extinctions, evolving and continuing to thrive, and then you look at our survival on this planet. We're about 100, 200,000 years old, And in the last 1,500 years, we've consumed 90% of all the fish. We've consumed 75% of the forests. We've consumed, most of our life support system. And that's what we're trying to point out in this, that it's, it's not hugging trees anymore. We got to save ourselves and the ecosystems we depend on for survival. And in this situation, we might want to look to the strategies of these other animals that have persisted for so long as to how they've managed to survive.
And as the oceans warm and the fish shrink, somebody at one of your lectures, I believe it was a lecture, said to you, why should we even worry about us? Because all the fish are going to be gone in 2048 or 2050. We won't have any more fish. Why are you worried about us?
That launched our next journey. I'd spent 10 years with Sharkwater trying to educate the public about sharks, thinking that that was the pinnacle of what I could do for the planet and how I could make a difference. And yes, this woman puts up her hand and says, why stop us from eating shark fin soup if all the fish are going to be gone by 2048 anyways? Bringing up, an issue that wasn't possibly addressed by Sharkwater. And as we began to sort of unravel that thread and make a movie about it, it became glaringly evident. By the middle of this century, we face a world with no fish, no reefs, no rainforest, and 9 billion people on a planet that's struggling to sustain the 7 billion that live here currently. So that became the subject of our new film.
It will be difficult. I'll be dead. You'll still be worrying about it. Now, the making of Sharkwater itself. You met the indomitable Paul Watson, spent some time on the Farley Mowat, Sea Shepherd. Tell me about that.
To get to the most shark-rich waters in the world for Sharkwater, I needed a boat. And the boat and the group that I found that was going to protect sharks was Sea Shepherd Conservation Society. And in 2002, there was virtually no one doing anything to save sharks except Paul Watson, who was going down there to try to stop illegal long-lining. So we teamed up for the creation of Sharkwater. And if you've seen Sharkwater, a few months into the journey, when I was expecting to go and make a pretty shark documentary, we'd rammed a pirate fishing boat, been charged with attempted murder, the Costa Rican mafia was behind it, all because of how much money there is in shark fins and shark fin soup.
What did you learn from Watson about negotiating with authorities in countries like Panama, Costa Rica?
I learned a lot from Paul Watson, actually, and he became one of my heroes. At the time, I was 22, I was a wildlife photographer, and I had the whole world and my whole life ahead of me and what I wanted to do as a human. And my first sort of environmental mentor didn't care what anyone thought in any way, didn't care about authority, didn't care about governments, and just wanted to do his thing and held the importance of life and the importance of life in the oceans above anything else.
And didn't care about guns being pointed at him.
Didn't care about guns, didn't care about authorities, and we ended up running from Costa Rica while the Coast Guard's chasing us with machine guns, and we're wrapping our boat with barbed wire. And that's part of his thing. And
pretty much.
It's pretty inspiring.
Were you ever scared out of your wits?
A lot. I was scared a lot out of my wits. So as we're running from Costa Rica and there's machine guns being pointed at us and they're telling us they're going to shoot us, I'm hiding behind the little metal deck a little bit, and then I'd pop up and shoot, and then get too scared and then pop back down, and then sort of realize that they probably weren't going to shoot the cameraman, and then I could stay out a little bit longer and film a little longer.
Perhaps they're not going to shoot the cameraman, but they're probably not all perfect shots. That too.
That too, yeah.
Also, when you have a camera and you're at war or at sea, you'd think that they'd leave you alone, but not necessarily. Did you feel part of the crew in a sense? Did they accept you and your mission?
It was
Did
tough.
they understand it?
I think they did eventually, but I was sort of faking it till I made it. You know what I mean? I'd never made a film before. I was reading books on how to make movies on the plane on the way there. I had 2 movies on my laptop computer which were guiding me, Snatch and Emily, on how to make movies.
Perfect.
So, and when I showed up, I was 22, I probably looked 18, and the rest of the crew, a bunch of them were older than I. And here I am showing up with an HD camera to make a documentary, and I'm sort of, the privileged one on the boat while they're scrubbing the deck and making food. And so it took a little while for me to win them over.
I bet. The eco-dreamer, so to speak. We'll come back with Rob Stewart, Save the Humans, his new book. He is the creator of Sharkwater, award-winning documentary. He's got a new documentary out, Revolution, which will hit the theaters Earth Day next year.